Hello dear learners, welcome to SWAYAM NPTEL course on Methodology of Educational Research, and I am Dr. Saritanand from Department of Education, Vinay Bhavan, Vishwabharati, Shantiniketan, and today we will talk about on the module 29 narrative analysis, and this is the lecture 29. And before going to the lecture, we will go through the concepts covered. Earlier we had discussed grounded theory, its goal and perspective, then methods of grounded theory, different types or approaches of grounded theory, the concept of memoing, different types of coding, and then also we had gone through the grounded theory in educational and social researches, its implication and criticism of grounded theory. Now we will go through the narrative analysis. So we will start with this picture. I hope you find it very interesting. So, this kind of scenario where we want to tell the story, take the narration of the respondent or the participants, then we can conduct the narrative analysis. And if I will ask you when you are listening or watching this lecture, you write in the discussion forum that what is your narration regarding this image. This is the pile animal fairy tale image, where 4 animals are standing each other, and then what is your narration. So, this kind of scenario or real life environment can be narrated by the people, and today we will talk about this kind of narration or narrative analysis in the research. So, narratives can be viewed as a social product, as a form of social interaction as well as an interpretive devices. It is a social product produced by people in the context of specific social, historical and cultural locations. It is a form of social interaction as the people tell stories about the narratives. People represent themselves and their words to themselves and to others through narratives and making it an interpretive devices. Although the term narrative and the stories are generally used in the interchangeably, there is a difference between two. The story is used to describe what the actor tells, and the narrative is the researcher's account. So, if you are talking about the Dhurandhar, and story of Layari is the story, but the narration, if the researcher had gone there and researched something, that is narrative of the narrative analysis. So, storytelling interprets the world and experience in it. So, narratives are stories, ways of knowing and communicating about something that is asked by the researcher. Narrative analysis is an in-depth analysis of a chronologically told story. So, I have taken the example of Dhurandhar, that is why it is also telling the story from chapter 1 to chapter 10 if you have seen the movie. So, here the focus is on how elements are sequenced, why some elements are evaluated differently from the others, and how the past shapes perceptions of the present, and how the present shapes perception of the past, and how both shape perception of the future. So, narrative analysis focuses on the ways in which people make and use stories to interpret the world. It is best use of exploration of ethical, moral and cultural ambiguities, and you have seen that 6 Gulf countries have banned this Dhurandhar, but people are watching in the Pakistan and Bangladesh and other countries also without in the cinema and halls, etc. So, what is the narration there? If researcher interested to conduct the study on this kind of scenario, the narrative analysis or this kind of study originally begins with the study of language. Later, narratives were studied as a part of poetics and cinematics, and research interest in narratives emerged from the several contemporary movements wherein there was a shift in the social sciences away from the positivism and in the master narratives of the theory like Marxism or anticipation efforts of women, etc. However, in recent times there is a lot of interest in narratives, especially in the postmodern and feminist studies as well as in conflict analysis and resolution. With the development of computer software, analyzing narratives today is far easier than it was earlier. So, when I was watching Dhurandhar, I had decided that yes, this is a good example of narrative analysis which can be teach or taken as example in our classes, and I am naming, and who have not seen, go and watch, and you can understand that how narration can be given from chapter 1 to chapter 10, and this narrative analysis has the several features. It is flexible approach which can be used with both written and oral communication in different settings, also in the form of movies also. It is initially addresses questions like what we said, who said it and whom it was said, and then goes deeper into the causes, why it was said, explanation, meaning behind it, meaning a line between the line, and effects of the spoken word. Moreover, it addresses and analyzes induced and emotional and non-verbal behaviors as well. Here the informations are active participants in the process, as the analysis are interpretive and reflective. So, the participants or informants are actively participating in the narrative analysis because they are narrating what they have seen, what they have experienced. Depending on the objectives of the research, the analysis can be fine tuned as needed. So, when one is likely to encounter some problem in narrative analysis, first of all, narrative analysis relies on interpretation by both researcher and the participants. They create meaning together, so it has to be joint exercise. Secondly, the participant can keep on adding information to the story, thereby forcing the researchers to continue with the analysis. Thirdly, the validity has a limited application here. It is applicable only within the specific narrative, as the narrative is true or that specific participant. Finally, reliability usually lies only within the specified knowledge of the participants telling the story. It is upon them that they are telling the true story in front of the researcher. So, what is the narrative analysis in the qualitative research? Researchers are using narrative analysis to understand how research participants construct a story and narrative from their own personal experiences. That means, there is a dual layer of interpretation in narrative analysis. First, the research participants interpret their own lives through narrative, then researcher interpret it as the construction of their narrative. So, if it was possible, I could have given you the assignment to watch the Dhurandhar and write your narration regarding the narrative analysis. So, it will be very practical for you to understand that what I want to say or explain here in this narrative analysis, because that movie is giving very much good insight regarding the narrative analysis. Narrative can be derived from the journals, letters, conversations, autobiographies, transcripts of the in-depth interviews, focus groups, or even the movies also, and other type of narrative qualitative researches, and then used in the narrative analysis. So, what is the narrative analysis in the qualitative research? It also talks about that the focusing on the systematic studies of the story, the personal accounts through which the individual makes sense of their experiences. They are telling about their story. Rooted in the interpretivist paradigm, narrative analysis assumes that the human being understand and construct reality through narratives shaped by social, cultural, historical context, and I think we are living in the narrative world where each and everyone is giving their own narration. they are trying to create the narration, either it is politician or the bureaucrats or the people from the academics, everywhere some kind of narration is going on. So, this topic is very relevant for us. So, rather than treating narratives merely as a report or event, narrative analysis examines how stories are structured, told and interpreted, emphasizing meaning making processes over objective factual accuracy. Risman had given this statement in 2008, and in narrative research the primary unit of analysis is the story spoken. The story is spoken in the form of written or visuals or the movies through which individuals express their identity, value, belief and experiences. So, when you are just listening the how is the Josh, then definitely you are saying your belief or your experience towards this phrase. So, this narrative may emerge from interviews, autobiographies, diaries, reflective journals, classroom conversations, digital media, digital or social media platforms, or this kind of movies which are fully made or based on the narrative stories. So, narrative analysis is particularly valuable in educational research because learning, teaching and identity formation are deeply embedded in personal and institutional stories. So, narrative analysis draws on theories from sociology, psychology, linguistics and literature or the literacy studies. Influenced by social constructivism and in views of knowledge as co-constructed through language and interaction. From this perspective, narratives are not neutral reflections of reality, but the interpretive acts shaped by power relation, cultural norms and social positioning. It means whoever is the narrator, they are not neutral. Definitely their personal reflection, their personal beingness or belief and their opinion is reflecting in their narration. Narrative inquiry emphasizes how experiences are narrated, why particular stories are told and whose voices are amplified or silenced within the institutional context. If we talk about the any matter which is not very much listened in the academics, then what kind of problem was there, what kind of narration was there and whose words are being given importance. So, this kind of narrations are there. So, types of narrative analysis are given. This is the umbrella term and not a single narrative analysis can be there. So, we will try to go with these types. The first type is thematic narrative analysis. So, thematic analysis focuses on what is said in a story. By identifying recurring themes or patterns across narratives, the chronological structure of the said story often preserved while meaning is derived from content. So, for example, in an educational study, students' narratives about online learning experiences may reveal themes such as loss of motivation, technological barrier and increased autonomy. I have experience of the narration by the student that lots of classes is being taken by ma'am and this is not good for us. So, many times students are not, if they are not interested in their studies, they are saying that this ma'am is taking so much classes. So, this is their narration. So, their learning experiences, their liking or disliking is coming in their narration, and that will be considered in the research, that is the thematic narrative analysis. The second one is structural narrative analysis. This structural narrative analysis examines how stories are told, focusing on narrative structure, sequencing and linguistic features. It draws heavily on the linguistic models such as Lebow's narrative framework, and for example, researcher analyzing teachers' career stories may examine how turning points, conflicts or resolutions are structured to construct a professional identity. So, this the narrative from the teacher will help the researcher or the student to formulate their own construct regarding the professional identity of the teacher, and taking the insight or idea from the teacher to student. The third one is dialogic or the performative narrative analysis. This approach emphasizes on the interactional context in which narratives are produced. It considers as the role of audience, researcher and social setting in the shaping the narrative. For example, in classroom research, a student's story about failure may differ when told to peers versus a teacher, highlighting power relation in educational space. So, if one student fails, he or she says कि ए मैम फेल करे दे. It means that the student narration is that the paper was not good, this paper setter is very cruel, it makes hard question paper, so I got failed. Whereas the teacher's narration will be that the paper was very good, whatever I had taught, I had asked, and this boy or these boys are not studying well. So, these are the dialogic or performative narrative analysis, which are we are seeing in our daily life classroom teaching learning scenario also. And now the visual or digital narrative analysis. Here I have used this picture. This is also taken from the Pixabay, and this type of analysis of narratives expressed through the digital media, images, videos, blogs or social media is utilized. It is increasingly relevant in contemporary educational research, because these days each and every individual from especially in higher education is using social media. They are watching the videos and reels, and all reels are very viral. Every time people are busy with the reels. So, here you can see 3 kids are watching or reading the newspaper, and we can say the children are telling the newspaper storytelling. So, this kind of conversation on the social media can be analyzed through the digital narrative analysis. And for example, analyzing digital storytelling projects created by students to understand identity development and self expression, it is said by Rizman in 2008. So, if we are talking about the narrative analysis, now the data collection methods in narrative analysis. Narrative data are typically collected through in-depth interviews, life histories, autobiographical writing and reflective journals, classroom narratives and digital storytelling artifacts, etc. In educational context, narrative interviews allow students and teachers to articulate experiences in their own words, enabling researchers to capture emotional, cognitive and social dimensions of learning. So, data collection is flexible here, the participant centered and open, often allowing respondent to guide the direction of the narrative. This openness supports the ethical engagement and respects participants as meaning makers rather than mere the data provider or data sources. So, capturing the narrative data, this is also a skill of researcher, that while human naturally creates narratives, everyone is ready with their own narratives, their own stories. When interpreting their own lives, certain data collection methods are more conducive to understanding your research participants' sense of self narrative. Semi-structured interviews, for example, give the interviewee to space to go on the narrative tangent and fully convey their internal narratives. So, give them space to speak up, to express themselves as per their narrative. Heavily structured interviews that follow a question answer format or written surveys are less likely to capture the narrative data. Transcribing the narrative data, when we are using the interviews, so narrative analysis has dual layer of interpretation. Researchers should not take narrative interview at face value, because they are not just summarizing a research participant's self narrative. Instead, researchers should actively interpret how the interviewee created that self narrative, how they have given their response, what was their expression. Thus, narrative analysis emphasizes taking a verbatim transcription of the narrative interview, where it is important to include the pauses, not only the words, but the pauses, the filler words and stray alterations like This kind of filler words should also be noted, that these are giving the positive notion or negative notion or the surprising notion. So, this kind of filler words should be noted by the researcher, like oh, this kind of words should be given importance in the narrative analysis. So, method of narrative analysis also, the way narratives are defined, like different disciplines and defined differently the narratives, determining the method of analysis that will be used for them. Various types of methods of narrative analysis are present, but their usage is dependent on the aim and objective of research project. However, the boundaries between the various types are not demarcated clearly, and thus they can be used in combination too. The method that will be discussed here are the thematic analysis, the structured analysis, the interactional analysis, performative analysis, contextual analysis. So, these are 5 types, and I tried to create the visual, and in upcoming lectures I will not give the visuals, and I will leave upon you that you create your own visual with the help of given content, so that you will be used to of using some useful AIs for researches, and in our syllabus there is one point of AI for researches. So, I will deal with that. So, this is showing that 5 type of methods of narrative analysis: thematic, structured, interactional, formative and contextual analysis. So, take one by one. The first one is thematic analysis. This thematic analysis emphasizes on the what is said in the content other than how it is said. So, thematic analysis is focused on the what is mentioned by the respondent. The philosophy of language is thus of relevance here. It helps understand the meaning of what is said. Here narratives are organized by the themes and illustrated through the cases. This approach is useful when one who is analyze a number of cases. Researcher can look for common thematic elements in the narratives of the various participants. The context in which the narrative emerges is not an element of the analysis, but the content or the words said by the respondent is important. Then the second one is structural analysis. The focus is on the way in which a story is told. The teller selects particular events in order to make a story sound real and true. However, the thematic content is also looked into. Here language is an important element of analysis. The way how they have told their story, that is important. Structural analysis is not suitable for large number of the respondents, but it is useful for detailed case studies and for comparing the narratives accounts. Nonetheless, researcher must be wary of applying the structural approach very strictly, as it can decontextualize narrative by ignoring historical, interactional and institutional factors in the research. The third type is interactional analysis. It stresses on the process of dialogue that takes place between the teller and the listener. This approach is useful for studying relationships where the teller and the listener jointly participates in the conversation, such as courts of law, classroom, social services, organization, medical services, or any other place where the researcher or the listener or the teller is jointly participating. In interaction analysis, intention is to thematic content and narrative structure are not abandoned, but interest shift to storytelling as a process of co-construction where teller and the listener creating meaning collaboratively. So, the collaboration of both the people is involved here in the interactional analysis. Interactional analysis also looks to speech in all its complexity, pauses, breaks, other aspects of talk. However, the non-verbal gestures and gauges get lost in the transcription, because they are not noting those postures or the non-verbal breaks or words. So, that is missing in the report. The fourth one is performative analysis, goes beyond the spoken word and sees storytelling as a performance what is the teller does through the language and gesture. So, this performative analysis is focusing on the gesture and the language of the respondent. There could be different kind of performative approaches ranging from the drama to narrative as a praxis, form of social action. The researcher can analyze different features here, the characters and their positioning in a story, the condition of the performance and the setting of the story performed, the dialogue between the character, the response of the audience and the interpreter. This approach is applicable to studies of communication practices and identity construction. And the last one is contextual analysis, focusing on the narratives as a social phenomena that varies from the context to context. Thus, data collected from different contexts will also vary. If a researcher collects data in one theme from similar kind of respondent from different social contexts, the analysis will show differences in how they perceive the same thing. In the same way, differences can be noticed when the data is collected in one topic from the same respondent, but at different point in their career. So, their thought process change, their personality change, the scenario change, environment change, socio-economic background change. So, their viewpoint also changes. So, here contextual analysis will shed light on how developed or developmental process have changed people's thinking and perception. Definitely, with the due time, people's thinking, their due to the experiences, shared experiences, living scenarios change their thinking, and accordingly their opinion and viewpoint also changes. Narrative analysis has been widely used in different areas. Here narrative analysis in educational researches we will go through to explore either teachers' identity, student learning experiences, inclusive education and policy implementation, etc. We see the narrative analysis. For example, narrative inquiry has helped explain how new teachers construct professional identities during their early years of teaching. Similarly, narratives of the students with learning disabilities reveal how institutional practices shape experiences of inclusion or exclusion beyond what quantitative measures captures. So, in higher education, narrative analysis has been used to study first generation learners' academic journey and highlighting emotional resilience, cultural capital and negotiation of institutional norms. These insights are critical for designing learner-centered policies and support system in academics. So, now we will see the educational implications of narrative analysis. Narrative analysis has significant implications for educational research, practice and policy. We have discussed by foregrounding lived experiences, it enables educators and policy makers to understand how educational reforms and experience at the ground level. Narrative findings can inform teacher training programs, curriculum development and inclusive education practices by highlighting learners' voices and contextual realities. So, moreover, narrative analysis supports reflective practicing among educators. Teachers' narratives encourage critical self-reflection, professional growth and awareness of classroom dynamics. In inclusive education, narrative approaches amplify marginalized voices, helping institutions identify structured barriers and promote the equity. So, like every research type, narrative analysis is also having limitations. So, let us look on the limitations also. The subjectivity of data and analysis. Definitely, narrative analysis and its narrations are shaped by the participants' personal interpretations and the researcher's analytical lens, so increasing the possibility of bias. Dependence on the money and recall. Narrative rely on participants' recollection of past events, which may be selective reconstructed or influenced by the present perspective. There is the possibility. Limited generalizability. Narrative studies usually involve small context specific samples, making it difficult to generalize its finding into a larger population. Then time consuming process. Collecting, transcribing and analyzing narratives data requires prolonged engagement and substantial time investment, also sometimes money also. So, other difficulty is in comparison of across cases. Variation in narrative structure, length and emphasis make systematic compromise or comparison between the participants challenging. Ethical challenges are also there. Narratives often contain the sensitive and personal information, making confidentiality and anonymity difficult to ensure. Issues of precision and validity. Establishing credibility and trustworthiness requires careful documentation and reflexivity, and findings may be questioned by the positivist researchers. And the last one is limited suitability for causal or predictive studies. Narrative analysis focuses on the meaning and experience rather than the causal explanations, measurement or statistical prediction. So, let us go for the conclusion. Its narrative analysis is a useful qualitative research approach. It offers deep insight and how individuals construct meaningful thought and stories. Its various types, thematic structure, dialogue, digital provides the flexible tools for exploring educational experiences. In education, narrative analysis contributes to understanding learning processes, identity information or identity formation and institutional practices from participants' perspective. As it values lived experiences and storytelling, narrative analysis enriches educational research and supports more inclusive and responsive educational practices. So, I have mentioned the references. These are the references, you can go through it for your further reading, and if there is any confusion, any question, any query, you can write in the discussion forum. So, keep learning. Thank you.